Yes, sir.
I think Indian pharma industry has done quite well in the last couple of decades. There's a perception in India, especially in Indian pharma companies, the ones which have really become multinational, that there is a certain amount of bias in the US and the Europe by the local FDA, backed by probably the large American and European multinational pharma companies. Do you think something can be done, which I don't know whether it's right or not, but can something be done to see that that perception is improved and probably we can collaborate better in pharma, which is probably one of the fastest growing sectors across the world?
You know, you speak about something which is dear to my heart, not because we have an oncologist in the room, but I'm going to have a daughter who's a physician herself join me shortly, but because I spent my life in the healthcare field, in the consumer and healthcare fields. And when you look at that, Indian drug companies generally have followed the generic route. What does that mean? So it's the other side of our discussion today on innovation, right? It is inventive because you're trying to be reverse engineering and doing it better, and particularly dealing with things which are off patent. So that's the strength, that's the core efficiency you're playing to, and that's fine. As far as the FDA is concerned in the United States, FDA doesn't distinguish between where the product is coming from. FDA is about making sure we have product specifications. Do you comply with those standards? In as much as you do, then it's fine. Now, I'm not going to speak just because I happen to know that, but you know, there have been frequently issues of some company or the other not complying. And that's when the FDA either steps in. On the approval process, the U.S. is the most transparent market, and when it comes to healthcare, even more so. Double-blind clinical studies, how it should be done, how do you take it through the regulatory field, and right from phase 1 through phase 4, what needs to be done. Those are all very clear. And I think I have never heard any Indian company saying they've been discriminated in the United States. I had the privilege of spending half a day understanding the Indian pharmaceutical and biotechnology field when I was in Hyderabad, and they feel very gung-ho. They just look at how can we come and manufacture more there. And at least in the dialogue I had, my impression which I carried away was a perception exists that something produced in the United States has superior quality to something produced in India. And that is what is preempting Indian companies growing in Europe. So, you know, that's what marketing is about. That's what consumerization is about. That's where you're creating the perception amongst your consumers in terms of, and not only consumers, because medicines is really professionals engaged. It's doctors who prescribe and how you get through to them. So there are many other things which you've talked about, which are all enmeshed in that question to get into in detail.
Actually, it kind of relates to what Mr. Murthy so immediately put in terms of pricing, and therefore the costing of American products or engineering. That probably is a bar to trade. On that, internally, public-private participation or partnerships in the United States, not really the model. In India, that's what we've adopted. And what that has done, especially in the energy sector right now, is that it has actually started bringing down prices. Because there's a lot of price innovation, other kinds of innovation, technological innovation that the private partner brings in that the public partner probably cannot or has not over these years. Come January the 5th, public service or public sector units, PSUs are mandated now to go the bidding route for energy tariffs or power tariffs. That's going to actually bring down prices. Why is it that the United States hasn't gone that route at all?
There are two different elements to this. And that's to do with the evolution of different economies which have evolved in their own way. India has done brilliantly well. Yet India's liberalization happened only in 1991. So you got to step back and say, in 20 years India has done great. Or you can step back and say, when did I get independence and how well I have done? So the time frames change. The institutions which India came up with were the public sector. America, on the other hand, is the bastion of capitalism and free markets. Our public sector is probably that small and that big. It's all private sector. It's private sector led. So the feeling which you indicate in terms of where is public sector in this, or public-private partnership, is not clearly visible because we don't have a public sector enterprise of the magnitude of the nature which you have, nor will we, because that's the American model, if you may. But I perhaps could have elaborated in the context of my speaking, which I'll choose to do now, when I was talking about government labs. Government labs are funded through taxpayer money. That is as public as you can get. And if I talked about the internet and GPS developed out of the defense labs, what I also conveyed to you was ARPA-E, which is within the energy department. We have created the lab, which is doing what? Which is basically providing incubation for very innovative, high-risk, transformational projects which could materially change the way we do things. As I said, size of a car, lights up the entire state of New York. Do you think private sector would engage at this point in time? Those are projects where the risk component is high, that even the private equity and venture capital are unwilling because of the high risk. But the US government, through a competitive bid process of evaluating all the transformational projects, did invest and provide seed money. It was just not grant, but it was a matching grant given to people who had the will to put their own efforts behind sweat money and other things beyond it. They were encouraged through US taxpayer money, through the stimulus funds, going into such projects. So that's a perfect demonstration, I'll argue, of public-private enterprise, because when it takes back, to go back, it's not anathema to what we do, to take it back to the private sector orientation, the market orientation of the United States. We say, we have provided you with the first round of funding, which is really a catalyst, but the second one will be raised in the marketplace through market mechanisms. So that's how public-private enterprise, in our case in a funding situation, we've done.